I've been working on a book for years. And it's not that writing is difficult, but it is difficult for me in many ways. And so I've decided to maybe make my book a video. No, the good thing about that is you get to see the person who wrote the book, who had the history, who did these things. I was born in 1929, the year of the Depression. And I grew up during the Depression. And it wasn't a bad time for me. I was just a kid. What did I know? I had nothing to compare it with. My parents did okay during the Depression. I was really lucky in many ways because my father was a musician. He played the clarinet and saxophone, and he was able to make money to help us by forming a small band and playing at people's parties. In those days, people didn't have discos and didn't play records for music at parties. They hired a band. And that was good for my father. He went to many parties and played the band and made some extra money. You know, in many ways, I don't know for sure, but there was people during the Depression who had money, and there were people who didn't have money and didn't have jobs. Anyhow, it all worked out okay for me. We had a place to live. We had food. You know, I lived a fairly nice life during that period of time. But as a child, how would I know? I would have nothing to compare it with. But I don't remember suffering badly because of it. And that's part of the story. I just want to mention the fact that I grew up during the Depression. There's many stories I could tell that, but that's not where I want to start in my life. Where I want to start in my life was in 1946. I was 16 years old. My father had decided to become a farmer. He grew up on a farm and he knew farming, but he decided to be a farmer, but a small farm. A farmer more or less in name only. Because he had to work. And I lived in Covington, Kentucky at that time. It was right across the river from Cincinnati. And my father worked there. During the Depression, he found a job. And that was very important during the Depression. To find a job, you kept a job. You didn't change your jobs like we did later. And that was his important job. And he stayed at that job. And he worked as a paper cutter. He was not an educated person. Neither of my parents had gone to school. They had gone to the 6th grade. And that's all that was required, basically, in the United States to complete your education. And I had grown up in Covington. It's like the suburb of Cincinnati, so I only knew city life. And when my father decided to take up farming, he didn't do the farming. I did the farming. And the thing is that it was very frightening to me because being a city boy and being in the country is quite a contrast. And in many ways I felt very insecure and afraid. My father taught me everything I needed to know to be a farmer. I could plow, I could plant crops, I could cut the hay, I could milk cows, things I didn't know, but I was the oldest son, and consequently it fell upon me to do those things that are required of an older son. And in many ways it was nice. It was nice to know something like farming. But I wasn't too happy about it because it's hard work, and I had to go to school and do the farming, and my father would go to work every day, and a long drive to Cincinnati where he would work. And as a young man, I didn't appreciate being a farmer. I didn't appreciate being in a rural school. It was not like the school I had in Cincinnati. I'm not in Cincinnati, but in Covington. It was like a college. It was a campus with many buildings. And they had a football team, and they had tennis courts, and they had all kinds of great things. But in the Independence, Kentucky, and that was where the school was located. The school was just one little building in the middle of a field. They had a football team, but there wasn't much. And I was so far ahead of everybody, it was really, I had to repeat everything. And people didn't like me because I was a city boy. You know what I mean? They were all country boys. But I survived it, but I wasn't happy. I was really unhappy to leave all my friends and the big school I was in and all the activities I had. It's enough complaining. So in 1946, a friend of mine that I knew in the local area mentioned the fact that we could join the Army and we could become veterans, and that would mean we have all the benefits of being a veteran, college education, being able to buy a house, having medical, and et cetera, et cetera. But what interested me more than anything else was the college education. 4 years of college if we spent 3 years in the Army. Well, in those days, if you didn't have the money, if you hadn't saved the money, or your parents didn't have the money, or you didn't have a grant, or some other scholarship or whatever, you couldn't go to college because you had to pay for it. And there were no loans. You couldn't get a loan like you can, today. So I decided to join up and get the 4 years of college. I really didn't know what that really going to be for me. You as a young guy, you think, oh God, it'd be great to leave home and my parents and do what I want and all that kind of stuff. I'll join the Army, isn't that a great thing to do? I'll be in the Army and God, I'll be important, I'll be in uniform, and those things that young people have. So I joined the Army. And the nice thing about joining the Army with my friend, we could stay together. In other words, I would at least have somebody else that I knew would be part of what I was doing. So we joined the Army and we rode the trains. In those days, airplanes were very expensive and not used very much, but what was used was a train. And the trains were nice. You had two forms of train. You had the coach, where you would sit in a seat, like on a bus or whatever, but, you could be comfortable enough. Or you could have a stateroom, a room where you could go and you would have a bed and a place, it's sort of a separate little place. Well, of course, I didn't have the money for that, so I took the coach. And the nice thing about the coach is you get a chance to meet a lot of people. And I met a lot of those soldiers that were coming home. And they had great fun with us. I mean, these were a lot of guys, a lot older. They had fought the war. They were veterans. They had been in battle and one thing and another like that. And they sort of made fun of us, not in a nasty way, but sort of a amusing way. Okay? So what happened was that they would say, well, this is good advice for you. When you get in the Army, stay away from the main office, because you don't want to get your name known, because if they know your name, they'll put you on KP and stuff like that. Anyhow, they were trying to clue us in on what it is to be in the Army, and I didn't understand the thing they were saying. Not even later. But it was nice. It was nice to meet these guys who had risked their lives, had been in Europe and had fought the war, and they were the true veterans, and I was their replacement. And they appreciated that. They appreciated that I had joined up and I was going to do this. And it was fun. So we went to Fort Dix to get our basic training. And I will continue with this in the next episode.